The air in the makeshift briefing hut was heavy with the smell of stale coffee and cigarette smoke. Sergeant Sarge Miller traced a finger over the crudely drawn map, its lines worn thin by countless prior missions. The map showed Highway 19, a notorious stretch of road winding through the central highlands of Vietnam, nicknamed the Street Without Joy by the French decades earlier. For Miller and his crew, it was simply the Gauntlet. Their mission was to escort a convoy of fuel and ammunition trucks from Quy Nhon to a fire support base deep in enemy territory. Miller's crew, the riders of the gun truck named Eve of Destruction, were seasoned veterans of the road. There was Thompson, the young but quiet 50-caliber gunner who rarely spoke but saw everything. Then there was Sanchez, the brash M60 gunner, whose jokes were the only thing that cut through the tension. Finally, there was the driver, Private First Class Jones, a kid who looked barely old enough to shave but could navigate the truck through the worst terrain. They sat in silence, listening to the platoon leader detail the threats. Potential for mines, RPGs, and a likely ambush at a known choke point near the village of An Khê. Miller's gaze swept over his men. They weren't professional soldiers of the line. They were truckers turned warriors, armed with a vehicle they had built themselves. Eve was a testament to their ingenuity, a 6-ton cargo truck with its bed replaced by a steel-plated fighting compartment, bristling with machine guns salvaged from wrecked helicopters and scrapped vehicles. It was their sanctuary and their coffin all at once. As the briefing ended and the men walked out into the humid darkness before dawn, each of them knew this wasn't just another run. The stakes were too high, the silence too foreboding. They were the shield of the convoy, and on the highway of death, shields were meant to be broken. The convoy began its slow, deliberate crawl as the sun rose, casting long shadows across the red clay road. Sergeant Miller stood in the open fighting compartment of Eve of Destruction, his hands gripping the twin 50-caliber machine guns. The vehicle's engine rumbled a constant grinding rhythm, a sound that was both a comfort and a constant reminder of their exposure. The gun trucks were strategically placed throughout the convoy, like armored bishops on a chessboard, ready to protect the vulnerable supply trucks. The air grew thick with heat and tension. The vibrant green of the jungle seemed to swallow them, the foliage dense enough to hide 1,000 threats. Every bend in the road was a moment of prayer, every patch of tall elephant grass a possible hiding spot for an enemy ambush. Thompson, in his gunner's nest, watched the tree line with a steady, unblinking intensity. Sanchez, on the opposite side, hummed a quiet tune, the sound of his M60's readiness a silent counterpoint. In the driver's cab below, Jones gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white, his eyes darting between the road ahead and the mirrors, checking the line of trucks behind them. For hours, the convoy pushed on. They passed burnt-out vehicles. From past ambushes, silent steel skeletons serving as grim markers of what could happen. The men didn't talk much. The noise of the truck made it difficult, but silence was also a form of communication. It said, "I am focused. I am ready." They were a well-oiled machine, their movements synchronized by countless hours of training and shared terror. Their job was not to initiate contact, but to survive it, to absorb the first blows of an ambush, and deliver a punishing counter-response. As they approached the infamous An Khê Pass, a narrow section of road flanked by steep forested hills, a cold dread settled over the crew. This was where the enemy liked to strike. The quiet hum of the convoy was about to become the prelude to a symphony of destruction. The quiet was shattered by a deafening concussive boom. A massive explosion ripped through the lead fuel truck, sending a fireball roaring into the sky. The force of the blast lifted the truck from the ground before it collapsed in a fiery wreck, blocking the narrow pass. In an instant, the jungle came alive. AK-47s chattered from the tree line, their distinct reports echoing against the hills. Rocket-propelled grenades streaked through the air, their tails leaving thin trails of smoke, slamming into cargo trucks and sending shrapnel whistling. The convoy was pinned! "Ambush! Ambush!" Miller roared over the radio, his voice strained but clear. He immediately slammed the accelerator, his heavily armored truck lurching forward, not away from the danger, but directly into it. The crew of Eve of Destruction was doing what they were built to do. Thompson opened fire first, the thunderous thump, thump, thump of his twin 50s creating a brutal wall of suppressing fire, targeting the muzzle flashes he saw in the jungle. The spent casings rained down, hot and metallic, against the truck bed. Sanchez, on the other side, laid into the enemy's flanking position with his M60, sweeping the fire back and forth to keep their heads down. The return fire against there. Steel plating was a chilling, percussive drumbeat, a grim reminder of how close they were to disaster. Jones, the driver, was a master of his craft in the chaos. He weaved the truck through the wreckage and around disabled vehicles, ignoring the deafening explosions and the frantic screams over the radio. He drove to create the best possible firing lanes for his gunners, his eyes fixed on the road, but his instincts tuned to the battle raging around him. A near miss from an RPG sent a shockwave through the truck, but they held. They were a single, cohesive unit, each man performing his duty with grim determination. They weren't fighting for glory, they were fighting for the lives of every man, in the convoy and for their own survival, turning their improvised sanctuary into a relentless engine of war. The ambush ended as abruptly as it began. With the gun trucks laying down overwhelming, suppressing fire, the enemy withdrew back into the jungle, their attack broken by the fierce counter-assault. The deafening roar of battle faded, replaced by the crackle of burning fuel and the pained shouts of the wounded. Sergeant Miller and his crew emerged from the chaos, their bodies trembling from the adrenaline dump, their ears ringing. Eve of Destruction was a testament to the fight. Bullet scars covered its steel plating like a rash, and the smell of cordite filled the air. But they were whole. Miller looked at his crew. Thompson sat quietly, his hands shaking slightly on his weapon, his face streaked with sweat and grime. Sanchez was already reloading his belt, a haunted look in his eyes that replaced his usual bravado. Jones, the young driver, finally slumped, back in his seat, the tension leaving his body in a visible shudder. They had done it. They had broken the ambush, protected the convoy, and pushed through. They spent the next hour consolidating the convoy, helping the medics, and assessing the damage. Their victory was a hard-won one, marked by sorrow for their fallen comrades, but the mission was not complete. With the pass cleared, the surviving trucks limped onward, with Eve of Destruction leading the way once more. The drive to the fire support base was somber, silent save for the rumbling of the engines. For the men of the gun trucks, this was their reality. Survival was not an end, but a beginning, a prelude to the next dangerous mission. Their courage was not reckless. It was a resilient defiance born from the knowledge that their terrifying job was the only thing standing between chaos and the lifeline of the war. They were the defenders of the road, and their story, etched in scars of steel and memory, was one of quiet, unrelenting heroism.